So just a sec. Great. Hi, everybody. Hi, welcome to another episode of the monthly events that we do have. With me, your host Namna Brown, and today we're going to be talking about mental health, issues in Africa, and we're going to look at the myth and facts of mental health in Africa. Trust me, it's been a whole lot of a roller coaster with the African population when it has to do with mental health. I mean, if you had seen how our communication, you would, see that we had mentioned something about madness because a lot of people think in Africa. In fact, data has it that 80% of Africans, attribute mental health to only when someone runs naked on the street. But today we're trying to find out, is that true? Does mental health has to do with mad people already, crazy people running around naked, and all of that? Today you get to find out, and that's why we have awesome and experienced professionals to talk about mental health today from all parts of the world. And we're trying to let you, into, what our guests are on today, so that when they're speaking, you will know that they're speaking from a place of experience. We have um, academic doctors here, we have professionals, advocates here, we have activists rather, and then we have nurses here who are dealing with mental health issues and all of that. And trust me, we have therapists as well. So you're gonna hear from them. You're gonna be very, very educated today, and that's why we're really channeling it to the African population, just trying to advocate and create an awareness about mental health issues in Africa. So my first guest today is Mrs. Marsha Watford from the United States of America. She's an activist. I'm going to give all of them an opportunity to speak, but I'm just going to do a rundown of them right now before we, go into them talking. So don't worry, you're going to hear from them. I know you're eager. I know you want to hear from them. I know you want them to start talking. They are going to do that pretty soon. So we have Mrs. Marsha Watford on the show today. We have Pastor Peters on the show today, and we have Dominica Una on the show today. I mean, it's awesome, packed and ready for you. So, like it's always all about you. So thank you so very much for tuning in today. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for supporting us. I mean, if you haven't liked our pages, we are on Facebook. Move Africa Foundation is on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on Instagram, and we're on LinkedIn and also on YouTube. So you can watch this show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and also you can join us here if you have the link. But if you don't, I mean, definitely if you can hear me, you should be watching us from one of the social media platforms. So like I said earlier, my name is Namna Brown, and I am your host today. So I'll be going straight up with what we have today, and I'll be leaving it for the guests to introduce themselves, and I will throw the mic to the first guest on the show today, and I'm talking about Mrs. Marsha Watford. And after that, Pastor Peters will take on to introduce himself and what he does and everything, and then Dominica will do the same. So over you to Mrs. Marsha. Thank you for being coming to the show today. We can hear
Hello.
you now. I think you were muted. Please go ahead.
Hello. And thank you for inviting me to your show today. It is a pleasure to be here. It is certainly a pleasure to be a part of these conversations and a part of this, a part of this talk. I do bring you greetings from the United States of America, and it is good to connect with my brothers and with my sisters on this platform. So, when speaking with Mr. Brown, I understand that in Africa, mental health is one of those conversations that many are not willing to have, and that many are not willing to come to the forefront with it, and that also many that are in position to help do not understand that there is a need and that mental health does actually exist. Well, even in our countries and in our areas, we have also been through those stigmas before mental health was brought all the way to the forefront and to the platform of conversation and receiving help, organizations and people understanding, okay, mental health really does exist, and a lot of things is happening are happening due to mental health issues. So in our area, what we called it was a stigma. What a stigma meant was that people who were suffering with mental health themselves did not come to the realization that this is what was going on. And then when it came to the people's, the powers that be, they were also in denial that mental health was really going on, until mental health began to affect families and maybe their own families and maybe organizations and businesses. I come to this platform from both sides. I come from the platform because mental health affected my family. And because mental health, PTSD, trauma, those type of things are not conversations that's had at the dinner table, and that's conversations that's not had in our houses, we kind of miss it. So how I began this work is because in 2016, my son returned home to the States from fighting war in Afghanistan. He actually was in two tours of war in Afghanistan. He's a army veteran. Well, when my son came back home, my son was different, but I didn't know, as his mother, I didn't know that he was different. My family didn't know that he was different. But however, after his death, we learned and realized that he was different. My son committed suicide in 2018. Um, Left a lot of questions. There was a lot of questions of why, what happened. He was not this kind of person. What happened. It left a lot of whys for me, but I felt like that the why kind of died with him. But even in that situation, my first thing that I went to was his file. I went to his army file, which is really, really thick. When I began to go through that file, I began to learn a lot of things about my son that I did not know. And a lot of things that I learned about him that I did not know was all of the trauma that he had gone through, all of the things that he has seen, all of the things that he had experienced, all of the things that had been embedded into his mind and into his heart that was different from how he had grown up and from what he had previously known and what he had previously experienced. So, in learning about all of the trauma as I was going through his file, I also learned that he suffered with PTSD. I had no idea what PTSD was because I had never heard of it. It's not a conversation in our house. It's not a conversation amongst our people, and I mean the Black race. It's not something that we sit around and that we talk about, or that, well, it didn't used to be a conversation. It is more conversation now, but it's conversation now because of the trauma. It wasn't a thought to me or a lot of conversation to me because it hadn't hit my house. But it hit my house, it hit my life. So when it hit my house and hit my life, I had to begin to learn about what is this thing called mental health? What is this thing called PTSD that took my son from me? Because my son didn't take himself from me. PTSD took my son from me. Trauma took him from me. And my issue with the whole thing was he went to do battle for my country, for our country, for this country. But then where was the country when they needed to do battle for him? He was fighting a war within himself, that he was placed out here to fight by himself. I couldn't understand why that was, why no one knew, or where was the help, or where was the frontline army of people that was supposed to be there for him. But then I learned that a lot of times all of that is in denial, not just from our country, not just from the powers that be, but even from the particular people that's dealing with it. Because as I looked through his file, I also saw that when he returned home, that he wasn't set up with any type of counseling. He wasn't set up with any type of therapy. His family wasn't made aware that he was suffering from PTSD. His family wasn't made aware of all the trauma that he had gone through. And because I'm not in the military, I don't know what they see. I don't know what they hear. I don't know what they face. So as a mother, all I know is that I'm receiving my son back home. I'm receiving my son as a hero. I didn't know my son had been blown up before. I didn't know that he had stepped on the IUD before. I didn't know those. I didn't know that he had been shot. I didn't know that he had to shoot. I didn't know that he walked around, day and night with his eyes wide open because it was live or die if you didn't pay attention. I didn't know any of those things. So from his PTSD and from what happened to him, I was affected. And now I am affected with PTSD. And I began to learn about vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma comes when traumatic things happen all around us. Be it we hear it on the news, we read it in the paper, we see it in our backyard, we see it in our communities, we see it on our street. We're still all affected by that. It's a second nature trauma, traumatic experience. It may not have happened directly to you, but it happened in your community, it happened in your family, it happened to someone that you know, or you read it or you seen it on the news. So now you are affected by that trauma through what's called vicarious trauma. But I guess what we're here for today is to get rid of the myth. And one of the myths is that mental health does not really exist. They're just crazy people. That is not true. Mental health does exist. And there's a reason why crazy, as some see it, exists. Crazy didn't just get here. Crazy didn't just happen. Someone is not running down the street naked because that's what they want to do and that's what they think is right. This is happening because something has happened in the mind or in the heart to trigger this. Something has happened around it. They've seen something, they've heard something, a feeling, something. They have been affected emotionally to cause this to happen. And if those emotions are never dealt with, then and they never know how to cope with it, then whatever comes to mind to do to make me feel better or to get some attention, that's what has to happen because this is all I know. I don't know what this means. I don't know what this feeling is. It's unfamiliar to me. So that's where the craziness, for lack of a better way to say it, comes in. But it's really mental health. The myth, what you all call a myth, is what we call stigma. And stigma is the fact that you don't accept it, you don't think it exists for many reasons why. Some of the reasons why is because I don't want anybody calling me crazy. I don't want it preventing me from getting a job. But the real issue is the lack of understanding of what's going on. It's the lack of understanding by family, by friends, by co-workers, and by others, by law enforcement, by the government. It's a pure lack of understanding. Then the stigma comes because there's few opportunities for the work, there's few opportunities for school, there's few opportunities for social activities, and and few opportunities with finding a place to get help or finding for someone to talk to that really understands. Where
Awesome.
else does this stigma come from? From bullying, even from sometimes your own family. You better stop saying that for somebody think that you're crazy. When no, you really need to talk about it. You really need to tell someone how you are feeling. You really need to tell someone how maybe seeing someone get killed or maybe someone having a illness unto death. You really need to talk to someone about the place that it put you in emotionally, how it made you feel. We have to be aware of the different type of attitudes and behaviors of people that are crying out for help, that are trying to let us know without letting us know that I really have an issue, I really need therapy. And mental health, being diagnosed with mental health, sometimes it's not a forever thing. There's different levels of mental health. I had to go to therapy after I lost my son. I lost my son um, to suicide, but then 2 weeks later, I lost my father to cancer. So there was a double whammy in my life. And there was a time I couldn't sleep, go days, no sleep, nervous, didn't know how to be around people, didn't want to come out of the house. That was trauma. All of that was trauma for me because it was a brand new day for me. I had to begin the rest of my life without my son. I had to begin the rest of my life without my father. My father has always been in my life. So now I'm beginning to live new days because they're no longer in my life. They're no
Mm,
longer people that I can talk to. And I lack understanding about, okay, what just happened?
mm,
What just happened to me? How do I move on for this? What do I do? How am I supposed to how am I supposed to do this? Who am I right now?
So, Marsha,
Those were,
Marsha,
okay.
Marsha, I'm going to cut you in. I'm going to cut you in for the
Okay.
whys. You're talking. You're about to go into whys and all of that, and that's going to go. That's going to go deep, and I want you to hold that. I want you to hold that. I'm going to come. I'm going to come back to you and ask you on the basis of the whys and other questions and hows and all of that. But I just want to go straight. I want to go to Pastor Peters now and let him give his openings, and then Dominica, and then we'll go into. I'll come back to you with the whys and how. Please don't forget that part. It's very, very important that we
Okay.
come back and hit it from there. Thank you so very much. So over to you now, Pastor Peters, just so you can give us your openings and introduction and all of that, and then we can come back to the real conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. First, my sympathies go to Mrs. Marsha Warford over the loss of his son. I wasn't expecting
Real life
such
situation.
shocking information.
I
So,
know.
may the soul of your son rest in peace, madam. Also, my thanks to Move Africa Foundation for this opportunity to have this conversation with my sisters. For the record, my name is Pastor Peters Omoragbon. I am the executive president of Nurses Across the Borders International, and I'm also the director for international liaison for the Nigerian nurses in the UK, and also the president of the Nigerian nurses in diaspora. Beyond that, I am a permanent UN representative to Nurses Across the Borders for my organization. That has ECOSOC status. I'm the first Nigerian designated contact person by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So I'm a mental health nurse. I trained in Nigeria, practiced in Nigeria, retired from Nigeria, then relocated to the United Kingdom to continue my practice here. And I'm also an advocate for climate change because we initiated the conversation around climate change and public health within the UNFCCC discourse. So that is summary of who I am, but I just want to summarize all that and coming to the discussion. I think I would make my input when it is time for us to discuss it, since what Dr. Brown wants me to do now is to introduce myself and give a brief background of what I do and where I am from. So
Great.
once again, it's my pleasure meeting all of you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so very much, Pastor. Really, really appreciate that. So over to you, Dominica, and let's just do it and wrap up this session and move to the next.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Loud and clear.
Okay, so I'm so privileged to be amongst wonderful people like Mrs. Marsha today and Pastor Peters. And this is a conversation I really want to be a part of. Thank you so much, Ma, for telling us your story, because it's not easy to do that. And my condolences are with you. May his soul rest in peace. I'm happy you are able to tell us that story, because a lot of people do not understand what mental health is, or that PTDS exists, especially in Africa. I'm from Nigeria, to be precise, and my name is Dominica Ona. I'm more like an academia. I've been studying my whole life. So I will be coming from the professional perspective, because mental health does exist in professional organizations, but people do not accept. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm a climate change advocate. I'm a serial volunteer. I love to do things to help people. So whatever it is, whether in the health sector, whether in the climate change sector, but I'm a trained and professional engineer, but I love to volunteer in different organizations. I currently head different NGOs, and right now I do a lot of things. So I think that would just be my introduction. I love this conversation, and I'm happy we are talking about it. I tell you what, I think we still have the notion that mental health does not exist in Nigeria. I know Mrs. Masha is coming from the US and Pastor Peters is coming from the UK, and they've all lived, or Pastor Peters has lived most of his life in Nigeria, so he understands where I'm coming from. Like, you get to see people go through a lot, but they don't want to talk about it. And I would say why it's kind of working out in Africa or Nigeria is because we always have people around. You know, our families are like our therapists. So that's why people don't see it really happen firsthand. But I think I've experienced mental health firsthand. So when we're talking about it, I'm going to go into details. And I'm so happy to be part of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Dominica. Really appreciate that opening, and thank you, Pastor Peters. Thank you, Minister Marsha. So we'll be going into the opening statement by our guest, and I just want to say, in addition, that Minister Marsha is actually the founder and director of United Services for Youth. I mean, it's one thing for you to go through something, and then another thing for you to turn that situation into to a positive, thing that benefits others. And this is one of the things that have inspired me about Minister Marsha. And I mean, I love it that she is on this show, not just as a professional, someone that is in the mental health field, but also someone with an experience. So this is to our audience. If you have your questions, we're going to come to the Q&A session. So we just want you, if you have questions, you can send it in. We are going to answer. And please, when you send in your question, just write who you are directing the question to, so we can be able to direct the question to the guest. So I will want to go back. I think I would just say in the next 3 minutes, I'll go back to Minister Marsha to complete what she had started. And after that, we will go to Pastor Peters, and then we'll go to Dominica, and then we'll go to the next session. So we will start, we will go back to continue with Minister Marsha now, and then with others. So thank you so very much. Minister Marsha, you have the floor for 3 minutes, and then we'll go to Pastor Peters. Thank you.
So I would just say for these 3 minutes, the most important thing to me about mental health and what we're all dealing with in our various places in Nigeria, the UK, and here in the United States, we need to encourage people to know the facts about mental health. First of all, educate yourself about mental health, including even substance abuse. So when you are around people and around your families, you can recognize the behaviors and the attitudes, and that they can become more comfortable about opening up about those emotions and about what's going on. And even when they open up, and even when you recognize it, stay positive and know the right things to say at the right moments to say it. Not, oh, you're crazy, or don't make them think that their emotion or what they're feeling does not exist. Help them to feel inclusive and help them to feel that they're not, they're not alone. And it doesn't matter what profession you're in. It could be a nurse at the hospital. They see a lot of traumatic things as well. They suffer from mental health just as we do. Therapists suffer from mental health, and then be driven by what you're going through, be driven by those emotions, be driven to help, someone else to, to overcome. And once you're educated, spread the education, spread your knowledge to someone else about this. And as much as you can, especially in Nigeria, raise awareness that this does exist. Raise awareness, keep talking about it, keep having conversations, keep pushing it. And when something happens, always recognize that part in what's, in what's going on. And the trauma, speak to the trauma through mental health and through that help and that knowledge and the education that you have about the mental health. Keep on talking about it and keep on pushing it.
Thank you so much. That was so brief and straight to the point. I have a lot of questions already, so I'm trying to tell you to get ready. And I know that the audience have questions for you. They're already throwing it something in the comment section, and please keep bringing in more comments wherever you're watching. Facebook, Twitter, just write it on the comment section. It's going to come to us. We're going to see it. So don't worry, just write it there. We're going to see it. And please remember to write the name of the guest. So I would like to move on to Pastor Peters now to give his opening. Thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Once again, thank you, Dr. Brown. The topic is mental health therapy in Africa. Is it a myth or fact? I will start my discussion by defining some terms that will be coming across today. And the first term I want to talk about is the word myth. And what does it mean? It's a widely held but false belief of idea. For example, there is a belief that prime rose helps to cure eczema, but that is a myth according to dermatologists, so they don't believe that. So, and then what is mental health? According to the WHO, mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. Mental health is not just the absence of mental disorders or mental difficulties. It exists as a complex continuum which is experienced differently from person to person. Mental health is a basic human right, you must ask me. And what are mental disorders? I just want to let me explain that quickly. You have two forms of mental disorders. You have the organic mental disorders and you have the functional mental disorders. So now, if it is organic, that is how to do with the structures. Epilepsy, for example, is an organic mental disorder because it affects the structures of the brain. But when you talk of other forms of mental disorders, like you have what we call the neurosis or the psychosis, those are functional because it has to do with the functions of the brain. And so in terms of neurosis, it has to do with that is where you have anxiety, you have obsession, you have panic attack. Those one has to do with the responses to the environmental stressors. And then for psychosis, that is the more severe form of mental illness. That is where you have schizophrenia with its various types. Then you also have depression. They are part of, and then you have the bipolar, you have the maniac. So those are examples of mental disorders. Now, when you moving on, they will move on to the word fact. What's a fact? That is something that has actual existence, or what you can say, a thing that is known or proved to be true. That's a fact. So Now, if we have that as our basic understanding, now the question is mental health therapy in Africa a myth or a fact? So that question to me is hypothetical. So if you agree, and then so are we saying that mental treatment in Africa does not exist, or if it exists, is it inadequate? Then therefore, what then is the current state of mental health care in Africa? So what are the facilities available, if any? So if you ask me what my answers to the question is, I'll basically tell you that yes, mental health treatment in Africa is not a myth, it's a fact. There are treatments for mental health in Africa, so it's no myth. But what is the problem we have is that the facilities available for the care or the treatment is inadequate. Now, according to a study recently carried out by Aderito and Co. in 2022, in their studies, the study was assessing mental health services in Africa, current states, efforts, challenges, and recommendations. They noted that the current look of Africa's mental health is gloomy, and despite trials, the situation has not changed. According to them, they said in Africa you have 1.4 mental health worker per 100,000 people. 1.4 mental health workers per 100,000 people, as opposed to the globally accepted ratio of 9 to 100,000 people. That is 9 mental health workers to 100,000 people. Also, there has been a very small number of practicing psychiatrists. You can count with the fingers of my hand the number of psychiatrists that are currently practicing today in Nigeria, ditto for psychiatric nurses. And then if you look at the attendance of mental health facilities globally, you have about 1,051 per 100,000 attend mental health facilities for mental health problems. But whereas in Africa, what you have is about 14 people to 100,000. So you can see that very low level of people even attend the mental health facilities. The reasons for this we'll get to know very shortly. For example, in places like Sierra Leone, 98% of the people do not have access to mental health services. That is in Sierra Leone. And then, according to a study, only 3% of clinical trials for mental health were carried out in low and middle income nations, with African nations making up the bulk of this fraction. The demand for mental health treatment in Africa has increased recently. African population increased by 49% over the previous 2 decades. That was according to the study by Lancet. The number of years lost to disability due to mental and substance uses disorders also increased concurrently by 52%. So as a result of mental health issues, 79.9 million years were lost in 2015. Cumulatively, when you're looking at the impact of what mental health disorders, mental health problems have caused to the people in Africa. Over the next 30 years, Africa's population, primarily comprised of young people, will nearly double. Considering the continent's socioeconomic difficulties, it is almost a given fact that mental health illnesses would be on the rise. Africa, hence, requires robust mental health care on all fronts. Therefore, the scientific community and other relevant public parties must intensify their efforts to prepare for this impending calamity. So now, what are the challenges that is bringing about this? Remember, remember my position is that mental health therapy in Africa is not a myth, it's a fact. So, but my observation is for that yes, though the treatments are available, the treatment or the facilities are very inadequate. So what are the challenges responsible for this inadequacy for mental health therapy in Africa? Now, about 96.3% of these barriers are attitudinal. It has to do with our attitude. Now, there are also reports of structural barriers, such as financial and care availability. So including treatment facilities and staff whose distribution is influenced by social demographic factors. I'll tell you today, within the last year alone, 7,256 nurses left the shores of Nigeria to the United Kingdom. That is just last year. The previous year, 4,000 plus left. So within a space of 2 years, Nigeria has lost a total number of almost 12,000 nurses to the United Kingdom alone. So you can now compare the number of nurses that have gone to the United States of America, Australia, even to the Middle East. So now, and as at 2018, the total number of registered nurses in the NMC register, that is the Nursing and Midwifery Council register in Nigeria, was about 180 nurses, 209. Total number of registered nurses as at 4 years ago. So if in 4 years you have about less than 200,000 registered nurses, and you have about 12,000 living within the last 2 years. So, and the Nigerian population today is about 200,000 people, 200 million people. Conservatively, it's going to be more than. And so now you now divide the ratio of the current nurses. Even let's go by the 180,209. You are having an average of one nurse about 10,000 Nigerians, whereas the average WHO's ratio per patient and a nurse is 1 nurse to 6 patients in every shift. And so now you can see that is one issue, one problem that whereby we are facing, that is reducing the access to mental health services. There remains a doubt in the number of mental health facilities in Africa, and the available facilities are inadequate for population needs. For example, Egypt has 15 mental hospitals across the country, and the inpatient units collectively hold less than 10 beds per 100,000 population. Nigeria has 7 mental hospitals owned by the government, which do not hold more than 4 inpatient beds per 100,000 population. In Uganda, there was 1 national mental health hospital and 1.64 beds per 100,000 population. Now, there are few or no specialized centers for children and adolescents, which is true. I trained in the foremost psychiatric hospital in Aru, Abeokuta. That was the first mental health facility, but the first mental health asylum was Yaba Asylum. That is the psychiatric hospital Yaba. So now, when in these hospitals, you do not have facilities for adolescents or for children, because not just adults that are affected by mental illnesses. So what you have is that even if you have adolescents who are admitted, you see they are admitted in the same ward with the adult population. So you can see that there is just no way such an adolescent will be able to cope with his or her treatment in that setting because of the generation gap. Now, most of these centers are located in urban areas. Most of the centers for mental health, they are not even in the rural areas. 50% of our population are in the rural areas. So, meaning where you have majority of the mental health facilities in the urban areas, 50% of the larger population do not have access. So that is a big disadvantage. And that could also explain why not very many people are aware that yes, there are facilities available to treating a mental health patient. In most African countries, the number of available psychiatrists is primarily less than the recommended 1 to 10,000 by population. Nurses, auxiliary staff, and medical and health assistants form most of the insufficient staff, as I mentioned earlier. Now, few countries, such as Libya, lack a standalone mental health policy. But the majority with a policy did not deploy financial and human resources to implement or monitor progress. The absence of a policy or a non-functional policy makes it impossible to reach clients with needs for mental health services, leading to ineffective service delivery and potential wastage of resources. In general, payment for health care is mainly out of pocket putting a significant burden on individuals and families, and sometimes causing severe financial strains. This generally leads to poor treatment outcomes, consequent upon the inability to procure medications. Many countries do not have the budgetary allocation for mental health, while those with budgetary allocation spend less than 5% of government health expenditure on mental health. So the sociocultural barriers towards mental health disorders remain an age-long barrier to seeking care. Just like Marsha said earlier, you can even imagine a place as civilized and developed as America. You still find the denial of the existence of mental illness and the facilities that are available, and even the inclusion of the family in the care. Now, if one would expect that the United States Army, they are well developed, they have specialists, they have doctors. One would have expected them to know more that anyone with a mental disorders, it is not just a patient that is sick, in quote, the family is sick, not in the derogatory term, but so in essence, when you are now managing the patient with mental disorder, you also include the what we call the significant others, which is the family, because that is where they're going to draw their support from. And if you go deep into the history of the patient, you could look the background of that very person could be from when he was coming up, because his coping mechanism when he was growing up may have been affected. And by the time he becomes an adult, there are things he was confronted with that he wasn't prepared for. And as a result, what happened is that, yes, there's that breakdown. So that is why there's a thin line between mental health and mental health disorders. There's just a thin line. The fact there is that our coping mechanism differs. So the way I might react to a stressor may be different from the way somebody else would, but depending on our background, so which plays a lot. So as a result of our socioeconomic background and the stigma attached to these issues, not many people want to come out for when they have this problem, even among the educated. The son wasn't an illiterate. He was educated, he was enlightened, and so, but he couldn't just bring himself to speak out to let people know. And even those who were responsible for his care did not do better. Patients are afraid of being stigmatized and choose not to seek help. A probable indication of a lack of trust in the confidentiality of the healthcare system, which is common in Africa. Here, in this climb that I am, I know what it is to respect confidentiality. So it is very, very, but in Africa, it's very easy for you to discuss your patient's problem and issues, even among your family and all that, which is a crime here. You don't have to do it. When you breach that confidentiality, you go in for it. And so, such is the challenges we are facing in Africa. Personal perspectives of the condition discourage patients from seeking help, as patients with mild disorders are generally less to seek help and want to handle the condition independently. 17% of patients do not think the problem was severe and assume it would go away on its own, a pointer to a generally low level of knowledge and attitude to mental health. So I'm going to stop here. We're just expanding on that. You see, in this climb now, people are being encouraged to speak out, because mental health problem is a problem that cannot be wished away. Some time ago, the Prince Harry, spoke about the challenges he was having, trying to cope with, especially after the death of his mother. So he suffered from depression, but it's not coming out, and they are not providing support for people and encourage people to speak out. And people are coming out and speaking, but there's still a lot to do. But in Africa, we see need. Activities like this needs to be reinforced so as to encourage people. When you have mild symptoms, come out and speak about it. They just say, "Oh, you are not able to sleep for 3-5 days. You think it is normal," or you go to the chemist and just tell the chemist person, "Oh, I have not been able to sleep." The person, "You know what? Let me give you this to sleep." and they give you Valium or give you something, you don't use it, and you not be, before you know it, you are not dependent on that to sleep. Not knowing, instead of finding out what could have been responsible, this person may have been suffering from one psychological trauma or the other within himself that is making or her not to sleep. But because that problem is not identified, the problem continues. And so I will stop here and we'll continue the conversation. So I think that is all I have to say for now. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so very much, Pastor. Really, really, that was an eye-opener, and all the daters, I mean, were amazing. I had a session where I was going to bring data to bear, but I think you've actually covered a whole lot, especially the Sierra Leone case and all of that. I mean, it's all covered, so I might not need to go into that, so to save time. But let me just quickly go over to Dominica for her opening, and then we can go into questions. We have a lot of questions. I'm not even talking about mine, I'm talking about the audience. So let's get ready. So Dominica,
thank you so much, Dr. Brown. I think Pastor Peters has covered a whole lot, in terms of what we need to know about mental health. And I don't think the duration for this discussion is enough, Dr. Brown. So you have to do something about it. There must be a follow-up because this conversation is really important. Thank you so much, Dr. Peters. So he has already talked about the fact and the myth and the technology and everything that is available in Africa. So he believes it's not a myth, that it's a fact. Mental health therapy exists in Africa. So I'm coming in another perspective. Do people think it exists? What do people think mental health is in Africa? Do they think it exists or not? I think a lot of people believe mental health does not exist in Africa. Because prior to this discussion, after you reached out to me, I'm going to be on this discussion table and all of that, I had to reach out to a few persons who are from Africa, outside Nigeria, and all of that. And I asked them, do you think mental health exists in Africa? They said, I don't think so. We are strong, There are so many excuses. We are strong people. We are mentally stable. So they don't really believe it does exist. But I think it does. In my own opinion, I think mental health exists in Africa. There are some things that are preventing people from believing it does exist. One of it is lack of awareness. This sort of programs do not happen often in Africa. So people don't really get to talk about what mental health is or what it's not. A lot of people think that mental health is only when you see people running mad on the street. No, it has to do with your emotional, your psychological health, everything about you, outside the physical. And you see a lot of young people these days, they want to get fit. So a lot of people are taking care of their physical, health, but they are not concerned about the mental health. You see people who want to get fit. A lot of people are going into, starting their gym sessions and all of that. And what happens psychologically? Another reason why I think people do not believe mental health exists in Africa is because of shame. People want to talk about things, but they are ashamed that other people are going to, criticize them. So they'd rather just go back into their rooms and forget it exists. Another reason why I think people don't believe it exists is discrimination. I think Pastor Peter has talked about that a little, discrimination and criticism. So when you talk about your issues, people are going to criticize you, and so you decide to just go back into your homes. And I tell you what, suicidal thoughts are increasing in Africa. It didn't used to happen before, but now it's increasing. A lot of people are isolating themselves. And if we don't take care of it, it's going to lead to something else. So I'm going to list out a few symptoms so that you'll be able to identify if you're mentally unhealthy. Number one is if you're constantly looking tired and stressed. You are so tired, you're stressed every time, day in, day out, no matter how much you try to get yourself out of that stress, you're always looking tired and stressed. Then something has to be done. You need to talk to somebody. If you're having trouble concentrating. You want to read, you want to do anything, but you cannot concentrate. That's another symptom that something is mentally wrong. You need to check yourself out. It doesn't have to be when you are psychotic or something. It means that something is wrong. If you are unusually emotional, then something is wrong. You know you're not an emotional person, and all of a sudden you become so emotional. Anything you hear, anything you see, you know, breaks you down. Then it's not about that thing you're hearing. It's not about the issue. It's about what is going on inside of you, and you need to check it out. Another symptom is you try to avoid social gatherings. No matter what your friend is doing, you're not just interested. You want to be in your home. You don't want to be seen with people. Then something is wrong. Another symptom is that you're unable to receive feedback. A lot of us in Africa, we don't have the mental capacity to receive feedback. If anybody says anything to you, it's a problem. You start fighting, you start causing trouble because the person is just giving you a positive feedback. So these are the things you should know. Oh, something is wrong. I need to like sit back and think and know what is wrong and see how I can tackle this. So what are the causes? I'm gonna just mention briefly the common causes of mental health. I think heavy workload. As a working professional, you do a lot of things and you're trying to impress your boss, you're trying to impress people in your organization, you're trying to be number one. Sometimes just take a chill pill. It's okay to chill out. It's okay to take a break. I know a lot of people in Africa, especially Nigeria, do not know what vacation is. Every day they're working. People hardly take vacation. I think I've learned something from the whites. They work as much as they can and they take a holiday, they go on vacation, they stop because it's important for mental health. When you work too much, you have to stop. There is a saying that all work without play makes a dull boy. So you have to like pause with all the work. Whether you're a business owner, whether you're working, whether you're a student, you study too much, take a day and do Netflix. It's okay. Like I do it sometimes because of course I study a lot. I'm one of the persons that I would pride myself to say that I study a lot. Whether I'm working or not, I'm always studying and I always have a lot of workload. So I've kind of devised means. I think I'm a typical example of someone who has workload and has a lot of stress. So I've found ways to distress. So you have to look within yourself and know how you can distress. What makes you calm? What makes you happy? Look within yourself and figure it out. And then illness and injury can actually cause you to be spiked up there. If you were normal, for instance, I was in an accident with my sister that was 2 years ago, and I came out okay, but she didn't come out okay. You know, she was bedridden for over 7 months. So those type of things affect you no matter how much you want to deny it. By the time she came out, she was. I'm not going to tell this story because it's a story to tell. She had her hand disfigured. To go back to work was difficult. So those kind of situations, and I tell you what, till today she has not been exposed to any form of therapy, and that is where we find ourselves in Africa. We go to school, students go through a lot, but they are not exposed to therapies. They are not exposed to people who talk to them. I know we say we have coaches in school and all of that. How many students really go to those counselors to talk to them? A lot of them go through a lot academically, but there is nobody to talk to. Like Pastor Brown was mentioning some institutions that are available. Are they accessible in Africa? If I want to talk to somebody, can I easily just go? I know there are other institutions abroad that if you're living in the US or in the UK or Canada, you can easily access those institutions. But in Africa, do we have accessible institutions? Institutions, like he said, that you can trust your secret, that your secrets will not go out. If you talk to somebody, can it remain with them? So those are the things that we need to like consciously build in Africa for people to really like come out to talk about these things. Sometimes lack of sleep can cause mental issues. I am one person that before I pride myself, oh, I don't sleep because I work a lot, I study a lot. So sometimes I get to sleep just 3 hours in out of 24 hours. It's crazy. It's okay to sleep. It's okay to sleep. Sleep, prioritize. Just make sure you are doing the things that are important, cut off things that are not important in your life. It's okay to sleep. Because if you don't sleep, your brain signals it's not good. Another thing is financial stress. This is one major thing in Africa, in Nigeria, financial stress, especially for the men, you know, when they reach a certain age that their families expect them to do some things and people normally expect. And why would people expect you to achieve some things? So it causes stress to you. Emotionally, you're down because, oh, yeah, here you're supposed to own a house, you're supposed to have a job, you're supposed to be married with kids, you're supposed to achieve a certain level of, and reach of wealth as a man. So African men tend to be psychologically stressed because of that. Financial stress is huge in Africa, in Nigeria. And you would agree with me that a lot of people don't even earn enough. So by the time their salaries come, those who are able to get the jobs is all the bills have taken everything and they are left with nothing. So financial stress, the landlord is coming, bills are coming. It's huge in Africa, and that is one of the major causes of mental health issues. Another one is technology stress. I would call it, for me, it's social media stress. Some people inflict this stress upon themselves. You go to LinkedIn. I was talking with a friend the other day. He said, once you just go to LinkedIn, you see everybody, oh, yeah, I'm so excited to announce that I've gotten a new job. I'm excited to be starting this position at, and you just go to LinkedIn and you're seeing all this, I'm excited, and you look back and be like, oh, for the past 6 months, I've not achieved anything. you go to Facebook or Instagram.
Are you sure that's not witchcraft? See?
You go to Facebook or Instagram, you see a lot of people posting their weddings, posting their happiness, posting their vacations. And you're stressed. You're like, oh my God, I'm here. I don't even have money. I'm getting 50,000 a month. It's not even enough for me to pay my rent. And someone is having fun. You go to Instagram, especially now that girls are using, for the ladies, you see someone with iPhone 14 and you go back home and you're mentally stressed. And it's crazy. So sometimes go on social media break. If social media is stressing you out, go on social media break. I'm talking to the young people here because I know it can cause a huge amount of stress.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I actually go on social media break. I don't care. I do that a lot. And then relationships, it's another major cause, There are so many things wrong with relationships in Africa. Maybe that's a huge topic on its own, A lot of women expect the men to do a lot of things and it causes the men a lot of stress, so much stress. And people see other people's relationships on social media and they feel that's how relationship is and they take it back to themselves and it's crazy. Now let's talk about why people are not really open to talking about this. Our culture, like I said earlier, does not really allow you, especially the men. I'm focusing on men because I know women are emotional. Sometimes we talk, but most men in Africa do not talk. Why? Because the culture does not allow them. African culture expects a man to be strong. It expects a man to be whole, to be a man. So no matter how much a man is going through, he's not going to talk about it, except we give them room. We give them room to breathe. We need to intentionally allow men to accept it. And you see a lot of young men are dying every day and people are thinking sometimes it's not witchcraft, sometimes it's a big illness, sometimes it could be from mental stress, could be from depression. So this is a very big topic, and I want to say that mental health exists in Africa. We need to deliberately accept it, talk about it, create awareness, and make sure we work towards it. Some people do a lot of things to distress or to not talk about the mental issues they are having, and some start using substances. And if we are not careful, Africa is going to be like one of those developed countries in a few years because so many people are using these days. And once that happens, it goes from level 1 to level 20 because that alone is going to break you down. So the Indiara we are talking about, sorry, I'm using that word, the madness we are talking about, we are going to see it is going to metamorphose from what we are seeing today to something great. So I would conclude by saying that mental health exists in Africa and we should take deliberate actions to making sure that we talk about it and we mitigate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so very much, Dominica. I think we've taken a lot of time, in giving our openings, and we're going to go into the questions. I have questions here, but I'm also looking at time and the questions that the audience I've put out, and I'm thinking, where do I begin from? So I think I would like to, there's a question that is just going around my head, and I would like to go back to Minister Marsha regarding her own side of the mental health. Pastor Peters had mentioned the fact that the person going through the mental health issue or illness also has the family. So when you're treating the person, you need to also treat the family, right? So if you are treating, if you are treating the person and you're actually looking at the family. So the question is, how did you get through your own PTSD? How did you get through your PTSD? To Minister Marsha, how did you get through your own PTSD after the loss of your son? Yeah. Thank you so very much. Over to you.
Well, first of all, because I am a strong believer in God, I do have strong faith in God. So I'm going to first say prayer, scripture, but I also, in the beginning, I had to come to the clear understanding and accept that I was dealing with this. Me, strong me. I was dealing with this, and it had actually broken me down till I was not the strong me anymore, but I was I was weaker, or I was going through something. I had to first admit that and come to the common knowledge that this is what has happened. This is what's going on. This is where I am now. So I have to begin to take steps to come out of it. Did I fall a few times trying to come out of it and want to give up? Yes, I absolutely did. But what helped me was therapy, journaling, and also making a list every day of all of the reasons why I needed to come out of this and why I needed to live. And living is not just existing as a person in a body, but living is just like Miss Una was saying. Living means that you are actually taking care of yourself. You know you're working too much, or you're drowning yourself, staying in the house, you're staying away from people, you're not talking, you're getting upset when someone tells you something. You have to be able to recognize all of these things about yourself, and you have to be able to look in the mirror and tell yourself, this is what you need, but not only this is what you need, but this is how you're going to get to, this is what you're going to do. Be it going to therapy, be it taking time to meditate and to find yourself emotionally. You have to go back into PTSD, go back into mental health and pull yourself out. You have to go and find you. Find you in that thing that took you. you know. So it was through prayer, it was through meditation, it was through, you know, it was through the scripture, it was definitely through therapy and being able to talk about it, to release it, to get it out. And one of the key things that I did, and this worked for me, I began to write letters to myself. Meaning, on those days when I wasn't myself, I wrote to the real me. So when I came back to the real me, I was able to go read those letters from the other me that was in there crying. You know, the stronger me, when I was in those days of strength, I read the letters from the me that was drowning, to help the me of strength understand the me that was drowning, what she needed and what I needed to do for her. So, first of all, you have to admit that you have a
Mm.
problem, that you have an issue, and then you have to be willing to do the work to get yourself out of that place.
So great. So acceptance was very. Pastor, you want to say?
Yeah. Quickly, I just want to add, just to
Yes,
support
sir.
what you said.
Great.
In mental health treatment,
Mm-hmm.
once a patient is admitted for treatment, the very first sign to know that this patient is coming out of the blues is what we call insight. Insight means you are accepting you have a problem and you know what that problem is. Once a patient recognizes that he or she has a problem, that yes, this is the nature of the problem, 50% of that issue is resolved. So that patient will now be positively guided towards whatever measures, because he or she will also be cooperating to say that, yeah, because I know how this problem, I don't want to continue with this problem. And so, which is, I mean, I'm proud that was exactly what Marsha did, because she developed great or quick insight into the fact that she has a problem, and that problem is not what she wants to live with. So she needs to get out of it, and then she worked towards it. And so, yes, it works. Well done.
Awesome, awesome. So, Pastor, to you, I'm gonna. So, the word superstition, Africa is seated in an explosive called superstition, and with the level of unbelief or no insight of what mental health is in Africa, we we sometimes and mostly attribute it to superstition, or have superstitious belief around it and all of that. How do you see this affecting the mental health situation or mental health illness in Africa? And what do you think are those strategies, or what can we do to get people out of this or leaving this ball they're sitting on? Thank you so very much.
The question is tricky. Why? Because I'm a pastor. I'm a mental health nurse, and I'm an African. Yeah. So the first question I want to ask myself is: does superstition exist? Well, that is, superstition is the permit me to use the word. Superstition is the language coined by the developed countries to things that they have no much understanding of. So to them, such is superstition. So it does not exist. But as an African, I wouldn't want to use the word superstition. Is it possible for one to be spiritually attacked enough then, or can mental illness be invoked?
Correct.
Now, as an African man and as a pastor, but not as a mental health nurse, I will tell you, yes, it is possible. I have to be very, very realistic with you. It is possible, but what I tell people who find themselves in such situation is that whatever or whenever it happens, you see somebody manifesting, the first thing you should do, bring them to the hospital. Now, because in the mental health institutions, the word cure for mental illness is there is nothing like cure. What you do is to try to control or suppress the symptoms that are manifested by these patients. Just like you asking me now, can you cure hypertension? Can you cure diabetes? No, there is no cure. But the medications we take for diabetes or hypertension is to suppress the blood pressure from rising and all that. So there is just no cure. So, and then you are told avoid large salt intake, avoid stress and all that. So once you're able to work with those parameters, it's under control and you can live a normal life. So the same thing when they come to the mental health hospital, so they are given medications, they are given psychotherapy, they are encouraged and told what to do and all that. Now, so for those who have the belief that they, as Christians, I mean, I'm a Christian, so I would definitely encourage them be praying, because as a Christian, I know that yes, with God, all things are possible. So there have been a lot of miracles in the Bible that science has not been able to dispute. So even till tomorrow. So many actually happened in the days of Jesus Christ and all that. So you continue praying, but the signs and symptoms that are manifested by those patients, when they are given medications, the medication will suppress those symptoms, and then they are talked through it, and then they are encouraged to avoid it. And then there are also instances whereby even before they even bring them to the hospital, they are prayed for and all that. They are okay. But I would not advise anybody, irrespective of my religious belief, that when somebody has manifesting some signs of mental disorders, you take him to the church or whatever. No, bring them to the hospital, because there we can manage them according to the signs and symptoms they present. So that is it. So as to the last question, how can we can this be totally be eradicated from our system or from our belief system as an Africa? I mean, that question, that I cannot totally say yes that it can, but with much education, with much outreach, and there will people coming out to speak about the challenges they are having and all that, of course, would go a long way. But total eradication is a near possibility. So for me, thank you.
Great. Thank you so very much, Pastor, for that tricky answer that you have given to the tricky question. It seems you caught me from where I was trying to get you into. That's very cool. So to Dominica, you are professional. You love to read. You love to work rather, and we have a lot of mental health issues going on in the workplace. And the fact is, some people, some bosses or some companies, organizations, they see this and they don't take, how do I put it? The adequate move, to probably solve this issue with their employees and all of that. So at what point, one, and as you said, a lot of things can cause mental health issues. So in a toxic environment in a workplace, at what point can we stop? Can we say, oh, okay, I can't go through this. This place is toxic. This place is affecting my mental health. What are the indicators for us to look out for to know that a place has become toxic, has become, mentally, is affecting one mentally, for the person to be able to leave that environment, with regards to workplace?
Okay, thank you so much. I was just laughing at what you said about Pastor Peters, that he answered the question politically, and that is an accusation I will not accept from you. Okay, so I'm going to speak in the perspective of Nigeria. I think I would be 100% right if I say that most organizations that are not maybe international standards are very, the organization setting are very toxic. Yeah, because Number one, a lot of people are looking for jobs. There is so much unemployment in Nigeria and Africa. So once there is a job offer, we don't look at what is behind the job. We just rush in because number one, we've been so unemployed. We've been unemployed for so long, so we want to get the job. We are not asking the employers what are the things that are required? What am I required to do? And what are the health benefits for me? Is there any hospital for me to go to? Is there a counselor that will talk to us? What are the things? What are the rules and regulations? What are the policies of these organizations? And trust me, a lot of organizations just have those policies on paper, but they are not activating them. So they make workplace so toxic for people. And once you get in there, it's like a battle that you have to keep fighting every day, and there is absolutely nobody to talk to. In some well-organized establishments, there are steps you can take. There are people, maybe you can talk to the HR departments that are going to take your cases if you run into any problem. Or there are some unions you can, pitch your troubles to and they take you to. And there are some counselors, there are some hospitals associated with your company like HMOs and all that where you can, easily see therapists and talk to them. And you're allowed vacations, you're allowed leave. I tell you from experience, there are organizations that do not even allow leave. So once you get in there, you find yourself in a box that you cannot get out from. All you have to do is work, work, work. All you have to do is get abuses from sometimes the bosses, sometimes your colleagues, and sometimes the workload or the stress from the work is too much. What do you do? For me, I think just like Mrs. Marsha said, go back to yourself and ask yourself, what do you really want? Is this the kind of place you want to work? Is this the kind of environment you want to work? Are you growing? Because sometimes it's not all about the money. You get to find out that you're collecting the money, you're receiving salary, but your health is deteriorating. You're not even able to use it for anything because every time you're sick, every time you're depressed, every time you're stressed. And sometimes you're doing that maybe for family's sake, you're doing it because you want to give money to your mother, you want to constantly have money for your extended family members, your relatives who are constantly calling you, send this, send that. And you're stressing yourself, you're in a situation where you cannot get out. For me, I feel you should get out. If there is nobody to talk to, if your organization does not, and that is one thing I think we should also look at in Africa. We should make sure that organizations have things in place, to help their workers, because it's not just okay for us to come there to make money and go. You should have mental health workers associated with your company. You should have a functional human resources department that your worker can go to. You should have an HMO, health benefits and insurance for your workers. You should have a scheme, a retirement plan for your workers. These are the things that stress people out. And you should also have a coordinated work plan. It's not okay for you to bring another person's work for me to do. It's not okay for you to ask me to come to work on Saturday and Sunday and I don't get paid for it. It's not okay for you to ask me to work overtime and you're abusing me and I'm not getting paid for it. It's not okay. I know we're in Nigeria and we are looking for jobs and you feel you've done me so well by giving me that job, but it's not okay to abuse me. It's not okay. So organizations should do better at protecting their employees. And then if you are the employee, please, it's okay to speak up. It's okay to tell your boss, no, this is not what I signed up for. Because the moment you begin to keep quiet, that is the moment you begin to go down. The moment he says do this and you accept, the next time it's going to double. So if it's something you feel you can do and it's not affecting you, it's not affecting your mental health, it's not affecting, then go ahead. But the moment you see that it has crossed the line, then it's time to pause and tell your boss, no, this is not part of my agreement, this is not part of my job rules, this is not part of my work, this is not part of my responsibilities. But if you have to do it, then you should get paid for it. And if it is too much, I don't think personally, I would rather have my sister or brother alive than have them receiving 200 or 300,000. So if it's too much, please come back home. For me, take a step back. Do what I think I like the method Mrs. Marsha talked about. She went back, she did her own self-therapy outside the therapy she received from outside. There are sometimes you need to talk to yourself. You need to sit down and list out the things that are causing you stress. List them out and try to distress. Stop doing them. You are the only one that knows them. In your workplace, is your colleague causing you stress? Have you tried to resolve it and it's not working? What can you do about it? Is your boss causing you stress? Is your work causing you stress? What are those things? List them out and then focus on. If it has to do with cutting it off, please cut it off. Because your mental health and your health and you being alive is more important than that salary. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so very much, Dominica. Your answer has, raised a lot of questions in my head in the context of Nigeria. Minister Marsha, you're going to hear a lot of, on how do I put it, is it unhealthy situations or situations that, that are very awful. The work environment in Africa is crazy because there are some work organizations you go into and there are no health benefits. There are no benefits at all. And it took my mind to the current surge of things, especially the remote work, era that we're going into, where someone stays in Nigeria and works in the US, stays in Nigeria and works in the UK, and all of that. And these jobs don't have benefits. And nobody's asking people questions about this, and on a daily basis, they pay people as low as $500 a month. I know when you look at that in Naira, it looks like, oh, it's a big money, but when you go into the situations that you have, it's nothing. It's, nothing. So, it raises a lot of questions that I would love to ask, but let me not be selfish. Let me go into the comment section to ask, questions that the audience had asked. And Minister Marsha, I'm going to come back to you with a question on, what parents, because when we look at the mental health, we know that mental health does not just, mental health illness does not just affect adults, it affects young people as low as age 13 to 18, and maybe even lesser. So I'm going to come back to ask you questions regarding what words, what guardians, what parents should look out for when it comes to the mental health situations of their children, which is very, very important. Pastor Peter had made a statement that some of these things, some people, some mental health issues, if you look into their backgrounds, actually started from things they had experienced while they were growing up and all of that. So what are these things that they should look for? I'm going to come back with that question. But first, let me go to the comment section and, just look at some of the questions here. There was a question about mental health in Nigeria being so underrated. Okay, that wasn't a question, that was a comment. And I think it is also sad that people relate mental health to witchcraft, especially among Congolese refugees, which the person works with. This question is from Daniel Osen, and until I took keen interest to know causes of mental health. So to Pastor Peters, you had talked about this earlier, in the question I had asked you. So relating to this, how would you say that, witchcraft, actually relates to mental health, they actually have effects. They kind of inflict mental health illness on people, witchcraft. So I'm asking you this because you're a pastor and you are also a mental health professional. So I'm coming with one of those political questions.
Well, we're Africans, so you cannot separate us from our belief system that has been in existence since creation. But civilization and education has made us understand that some of these challenges or cause of mental illness, environmental, some biological, it could be inherent, some psychosocial, and all that. So, but the question you're asking is that, okay, is it possible? And that was the question I asked. Can mental illness be invoked? And I said, I just answered that as a mental health nurse, I would say no. Professionally, it cannot be invoked. Mental illness arises as a result of one's inability to cope with the stressors around him or her. So then, that's speaking professionally. Then, as a pastor and as an African, is it possible? Yeah, depending. And I also answered that spiritually, to a larger extent, it does happen, but don't take my word for it on this level. As I've answered you professionally, and I'm not talking to you now as a pastor. So I'm talking to you now as a mental health nurse. Yes, there have been instances where we have cases brought to the church and all that. You know, I'm saying it could just be sudden, and you now begin to pray, and then you conduct what they call deliverance and all that. So there and there, the person, whatever forces that may have accompanied that very person, if it is spiritual, of course, there is no way when two forces meet, the lesser one will bow to the greater one. There's been a lot of success stories that, but where it is beyond that, we're also quick as learned people to refer them. In my churches, there have been instances where people are brought around, and I say, no, let's take them straight to the hospital. It's not a matter that we have to handle here. I have never, because I'm a pastor now, misled anyone, either my other senior pastors or junior pastors, and I tell them, oh, don't worry, let's keep them here. No. As soon as I say no, let's say we can continue the prayer by the hospital bed, but let that very person start his or her medical treatment in the hospital. And so that is the other way. That is one way of me answering the question. So I've answered it on two aspects. As a nurse, I've told you it is not possible, and as a pastor, it is possible spiritually, but there is a level you get to actually understand. But even at that, you will still need to take them to the hospital to attend to whatever manifestation that will come up in terms of signs and symptoms. By medication, they will be controlled. And then by the time they begin to think straight, they will listen to you and they will pray. They also will join the prayers and they become stronger also. So that is the way I would answer this question, if you don't mind.
Great. Thank you so very much, Pastor. So, in other words, it's better to address the issue of mental health in Africa because of our beliefs or our belief system on two fronts.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, it's better to do it simultaneously through the spiritual aspect and the medical aspect. So it's not a situation of actually leaving one for the other.
No. That is not my proposal.
Okay.
That is my proposal. So I want to be very clear. You are saying anybody with a mental illness, so it will require a spiritual treatment and medical treatment. That is not my proposal. I said that as a nurse, mental illness cannot be invoked by witches and wizards. So anybody with any signs and symptoms of mental illness, bring them to the hospital, we'll treat them. And as a pastor, I said it does happen. It is not in all cases. But as I said, I'm also very, very quick to draw the line. When the person is brought to the church and I see the manifestation of that very person, whatever, the best we are quick to say, okay, let's take that very straight to the hospital to start his medical treatment while the prayers can continue in the church. I would not say
Awesome.
you take the whole prayer team to the hospital with him, and then while they are giving the medical treatment, you are not giving, also you are doing your own spiritual work at the side in the hospital. No, that isn't it. I just so,
Okay.
so I want to be very clear. I don't want to deceive you by saying, "Oh, I mean, no, it doesn't exist." I just answer it as a pastor. I have seen, I have experienced, and all that. So, but in the larger picture, they are better off in the hospitals than in any church environment or spiritual home, because
Correct.
there they will not even be exposed to some other situation that could even expose them to other physical illnesses or diseases. You know what I'm saying? And by virtue of what they will be, and so that is just it.
So let me add another question to you, sir. So can PTSD be self-diagnosed? I mean, if one actually identify early signs of its, common characteristics, can it be diagnosed by, we talked about insight, like for example, what Marsha did. Can we say?
I get your question. It depends on your level of education. It depends on your level of exposure. You must have read about it. You must have studied about it. But somebody who has no idea what PTSD is and is manifesting these symptoms or signs cannot know. You understand? So unless somebody looking at him or her will not begin to say, I mean, since this incident happened, I have observed a change in your behavior. You say that you're becoming very aggressive or you're becoming very withdrawn and all that. What could be the problem? And then the person may, at the initial stage, deny and say there's something wrong with him or her. But as it continues, you say no. And I think you need to seek help. So and then it goes to the hospital. Then they take what we call history is taken. Question and answer. Ask how is it behaving? How was it behaving? You look at what they call the pre-morbid. That before the sickness, how was his behavior? Now, what is his morbid presentation right now? And so you're not be able to draw a line and say, okay, fine. Okay, what happened? Can you tell me incidents that happened? And then by the time they begin to tell you, okay, so, and you're not beginning to, that is how those things are identified and all that. So it cannot be self-diagnosed in the sense of it, unless those who are well-read and they begin to see that they're even manifesting this thing, they begin to say, come on, there's something wrong. But some people may not even know that they're having a problem. And then they just continue as if nothing is happening, unless those who are looking at them, who are close to them, to observe there's a change in their behavior or their attitude.
Okay, so thank you very much, sir. So I'm going to put Tromo light on the abbreviation PTSD in case a lot of people are listening and they don't understand what PTSD means. It actually means post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah, is an anxiety disorder caused by very stressful, frightening, or distressing events. So in case you might be wondering what we are talking about when we say PTSD. All right, so just a quick question to, I don't know, I think I should throw this to Marsha. Can childhood trauma trigger mental health disorder? I mean, we've said this before, but just because it was asked by the audience, I think we need to put it out there. Can childhood trauma trigger mental health disorder? Okay, you're muted.
It absolutely, okay.
Okay.
It absolutely can trigger mental health disorder, especially if it has gone untreated as a child and unrecognized. Seeing things as a child, experience things, living within a certain type of household unit, witnessing certain things, certain traumas around them, it absolutely can cause mental health disorder in a child as they grow older. And if left untreated, it can lead to, to much diverse things.
Oh, great. So what we're trying to say is just my thoughts right now. We have kids. So in the next few years in Africa, we're going to be having a lot of people, suffering from trauma, different types of trauma, because a lot of kids are exposed to childhood trauma virtually, in terms of the TV, in terms of TV, in terms of the kind of movies they watch, in terms of the kind of what goes on in the internet. And some of these kids, their parents don't don't make use of the parental guidance settings in their electronics and all of that. So these kids get to see a lot. And imagine children in maybe crisis-prone areas in Africa. That means a lot is going to happen in the next few years, if that is, actually what we're saying. So, Dominica, you were raising your hand. Please go ahead.
And that's called vicarious trauma.
That does what?
That's called vicarious trauma.
Oh, okay, awesome. So, Dominica.
Yes, I wanted to add to what Mrs. Marsha said. I think childhood trauma makes or break a person. I'm from Nigeria. I've seen a lot of people who have gone through a lot or who went through a lot in their childhood. So now it depends on the person in question. It either makes you to be very strong and makes you to be so determined and focused to achieving some things because you have worked over time to build yourself and make yourself strong, or it breaks you and turns you into a psychotic person. So yeah, it's in two ways. Either it breaks. Most of the people you see these days who are suicidal, who are psychotic, who are arrogant and aggressive, trust me, it started from childhood. They must have experienced stuff in their childhood when they were young, maybe as a result of how their parents lived their lives or how their home was, so many fights in their homes and all of that. Most of the people grew up learning how their parents were. So they either learn from there or they keep being like that. You see a lot of people in their marriages, they didn't experience they always had to see their parents fight and quarrel. They grew up to always be fighting and quarreling and being aggressive. I would speak from, I think we've all heard of Pastor Jerry and Pastor Jerry's wife, Pastor when she talked about how she nearly destroyed her marriage. She said it's because of the kind of her home she grew up in, because she grew up in a home where the parents were always fighting. So she never knew that there was something called peace or calmness in home. So she grew up that way. But when she realized that this was going to break her marriage, she had to sit up and do something about it. Some people grow up in such a home and then they tell themselves, no, I'm not going to be like this. I can't let my home to be like my parents' home. I can't let my marriage to be like my parents' marriage. So I'm constantly working to make sure that what I experience in my past does not come in my future. So it either breaks or makes you as a person, as a child.
Okay, great. Pastor, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. A young girl that was raped at the age of 5 or less than 10 years probably was afraid to speak out. And I imagine the trauma she would have gone through at that very period. So by the time that girl, as she grows older, she develops that hatred, she develops that fear for men. Why? Because of the pain. So if that issue is not addressed, now it begins to affect her mental state. You understand? Now she cannot maintain a stable relationship. Why? Because of that experience. And then she could even go into depression or become psychotic. So, which is why when things like this do happen, you always encourage children to speak up, to talk to you, let them develop that trust in you. Now, that is one aspect of a traumatic incident. Now, when a child, in psychology, there are three phases of man. There's what we call the id, the ID. There's what we call the ego. There's what we call the superego. The id is the primordial part of a man. At that id level, you have no control. As a child, he wants to eat. All they only know is comfort, gratification, and like either you give me food or no food, or you start crying. So the only way you can know whether a child is happy is when he's been fed and is laughing. But if he's hungry, he only come to you crying. And then it's what goes in and what comes out. There's no control. So that is the first 1, 2 months. As from the age of as they grow older, from the age of 3, 4, 5 months, you see it at the beginning of the identify, you are now, you begin to toilet train them. That is from the age of 3. A child under 1 year can mess up his bed, no problem. 2 years, but at the age of 3, it's still messing. They cannot even get up to go and wee. Is a problem. You understand? That means that child was not able to come out of his either personality. Now the ego is that person in you. That ego. So whatever happens to you when in your id can continue in your ego. That is you are developing your personality. If your parents are very rigid in bringing you up, in trying to toilet train you as you are growing up from the age of 3 to now that is where you see people become obsessive. Maybe they are told you must eat at this particular time, you must go to toilet at a particular time and all that. People like that, they grow up and they begin obsessed and they must do things at a particular whatever. Their obsession becomes a problem to them. And if, like Dominica said, that they grew up in an environment that is an aggressive environment, they begin to say that yes, the only way you can relate normally is by being aggressive, because that is what they see back home there. Another. So when they go out, they are also aggressive because number one, they have learned that because it's embedded in their subconscious mind. Then the super ego is what actually brings control. The super ego controls the influence of the id upon the ego. So that is what they call the conscience. This super ego is psychology is what they call the conscience. So whenever you want to say anything, you want to do anything, it tells you no, this thing is it right? You want to pee. Is it the right time for you to pee, or is it the right place? That is the control of the super ego in psychology, or not in the common balance, it's called the conscience. So there must be a balance in all this. But your id, your growing up, your upbringing at the level of your id is very important because it affects your personality as a person. When you are growing, if it is not balanced in a way. So that is
Great.
the answer to your question. Can childhood trauma result into mental disorder or mental illness or whatever it is? Yeah, it can. It does.
Right.
And if you look back, majority of these unsolved problems that confronts the adult, because the adult is unable to draw a line between what is real and what is unreal. So those things that are playing back in his memory, they are the things that come out as symptoms, either by way of hallucination or delusion. It is
Great.
what they must have experienced, and they are not able to draw a line between what is real and unreal. That is because the super ego is unable to maintain that balance. It comes out as the symptoms. It comes out as the sign that is manifested in that very person. It tells you he sees this, he's seen the snake, or it tells you this, whatever. There must have been something that gives that picture. So they all come. It's confused and it doesn't know how to draw that line as to say this is real or this is unreal. So that is the situation.
Thank you so very much, sir. Thank you. We're really battling with time right now. I just want to throw 2 questions and then we can end it because we didn't think it was going to go this far.
I have another session that that is already on. Yeah, I just mute myself and took off, but so I'm supposed to be in.
Yes.
So it started at 6:30.
Yeah, so just let's make it one question, and that will be the question for Minister Marsha. How can families, how can guardians, how can wardens, recognize mental health symptoms or mental illness symptoms in their children? How can they do? How can they recognize those? Thank you.
Observation: when you see behaviors begin to change, if they begin to seclude themselves away from family, just kind of separate themselves, get quiet, like stay in the room, always separated, want to be somewhere by themselves. If the family is going somewhere, they never want to go anymore. Their pattern change. when they wanted to eat, when they would play, when they used to spend their family time. Their groups of friends change, or they begin to have no friends. The communication, they begin to lack communication. They don't want to talk anymore about anything. They don't want to answer or ask questions or initiate conversation. That lets you know something is going on, something is wrong, or they're holding something in. Most of the time when they begin to separate themselves and begin to get really quiet, no communication anymore, something is going on, and they're definitely dealing with something that has either already turned into mental or is about to go into mental. That separation and that lack of communication.
Great. Thank you so very much for that. Very direct and moving answer. I'm really, really happy with the conversation we've had today. And I just want to apologize to all of our audiences today. We're not able to take all your questions, but you can actually reach out to our guests on social media, on their social media handles. Just type in their names and you're definitely going to get them. I mean, if you look at our platforms, you're going to see that we had tagged some of them, all of them on our different social media platforms. So you can actually go there and reach out to them and talk to them. If you have any, they'll be able to, any issue, they'll be able to assist you. So I just want to say thank you to our guests. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to everyone that has been part of this. We're going to come back there. There's a lot of questions, a lot of analysis questions, a lot of things we're going to bring on board, and we're going to be sure to bring back these guests. They may not be together, but at least we're going to be trying to bring back all of them one after the other, to kind of address some of these questions because they are experienced and they are professional. So we don't want to draw too much time anymore. So we want to say our final goodbye, our last words in 5 seconds. What is your last word for the audience today? We start with Pastor Peters and then Minister Marsha and then Dominica, and then we can end the show. Thank you so very much. So Pastor, over to you.
Well, audience, mental illness is real. It is okay not to be okay. So all you got to do, speak out. So there's nothing wrong in you speaking out. Thank you.
Great. Over to you, Minister.
And I would echo what Pastor Peters have said. It is okay not to be okay, and be comfortable in that space. But don't forget to ask for help. Ask for help. Ask for help. Talk to somebody. It is really okay. And always pray. You can always pray. That is a free conversation. That is free help. Pray, but wait for the answer when you pray. And it has been a pleasure meeting and sitting in with all of you all. And I hope that we can do this again.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Minister. Over to you, Dominica.
Okay, just adding to what the amazing things they've said already. It's okay to not be okay. I think he said it just right, And make sure you always preserve your mental health. Walk away from situations that do not serve you. Walk away from toxic people, toxic situations, and always talk to people. Speak up. It's very important for your mental health. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, everyone. Thank you, guests. Thank you, audience. We will come back to you again. And this is the end for this episode, and see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Ciao.
Yeah.
Bye. Ciao.
Bye.